The Hollywood Con Queen. It's never easy to break into Hollywood. Sometimes, it's even harder to break out of the systems. So hard, in fact, that scammers are able to take advantage of those desperate for fame or a regular paycheck. Welcome to AI True Crime. This week, we'll be looking at the Hollywood Con Queen. The story of the Hollywood Con Queen is a tale so outlandish, so steeped in the bizarre and surreal, that it reads more like a Hollywood thriller than reality. For years, an unknown figure stalked the dreams of ambitious actors, writers, photographers, and makeup artists, luring them with promises of fame and fortune, only to trap them in a nightmarish con that defied belief. The Con Queen's reign of terror began around 2015, though it would be years before anyone knew the full scope of the deception. It started innocuously enough, with hopeful creatives receiving phone calls from what seemed to be Hollywood royalty, producers, directors, and executives with the power to make or break careers. The names invoked were prestigious, titans of the industry like Lucasfilm's Kathleen Kennedy, Sony's Amy Pascal, and even Marvel Studios' Victoria Alonso. These were people whose mere attention could launch a career into the stratosphere. The victims couldn't believe their luck. The Con Queen's impersonations were pitch perfect, her knowledge of the industry detailed and specific. She knew the right jargon, the right projects, the right pressures to apply. She dangled tantalizing offers, lucrative jobs in blockbuster films, opportunities to work with A-list stars, all expenses paid trips to exotic locations like Indonesia. But the dream quickly turned into a waking nightmare. The victims, many of whom had scrimped and saved just for the chance to get their foot in the door, were asked to pay up front for their own travel and accommodation. This, they were assured, was merely a formality. Reimbursement would come later, along with the life-changing job opportunities. But when they arrived in Indonesia, everything unraveled. The promised chauffeur was nowhere to be found. The luxury hotels turned out to be substandard or non-existent. The film sets were nothing more than figments of their imagination. And the Con Queen, that ghostly figure on the other end of the phone, vanished into thin air, leaving behind only confusion and empty wallets. For some, the horror didn't end there. After being strung along for days or weeks, these hopefuls were coerced into handing over more money. The Con Queen employed psychological manipulation with a deftness that would make a seasoned interrogator envious. She would scream, cry, threaten, and cajole, using every tool in her arsenal to extract more cash from her victims, all while maintaining the illusion that this was merely part of the business. The scam was meticulous, elaborate, and utterly baffling. How could someone impersonate so many powerful figures with such eerie accuracy? How could the Con Queen know so much about Hollywood's inner workings? As more and more victims came forward, a pattern began to emerge, a chilling portrait of a con artist so skilled, so brazen, that it seemed impossible she could be doing this alone. The Hollywood machine, built on the dreams of countless hopefuls, became a weapon in the hands of the Con Queen. She preyed on the very essence of the industry, the desperate longing for recognition, the willingness to sacrifice anything for a shot at the big time. The victims were often too ashamed to come forward, embarrassed that they had fallen for what seemed, in hindsight, to be an obvious scam. And so, the Con Queen operated with impunity for years, her web of deception growing ever wider. As the scam spread, it took on a life of its own. Whispers of the Con Queen circulated through Hollywood's back channels, but concrete details were scarce. Victims spoke of eerily similar experiences, the same soothing voice, the same empty promises, the same crushing disappointment. Yet, each time, the Con Queen slipped through the cracks, evading authorities and leaving a trail of financial ruin and shattered dreams in her wake. It wasn't until investigative journalists and private detectives took up the case that the true scope of the Con Queen's operation was revealed. What they uncovered was almost too bizarre to believe. The mastermind behind the scam wasn't a powerful Hollywood insider or a disgruntled former executive. Instead, it was a shadowy figure halfway across the world, operating out of Jakarta, Indonesia. The Con Queen was, in fact, a man named Hargabain Tahil Ramani, a small-time actor with big-time ambitions. Tahil Ramani was no ordinary scam artist. He was a chameleon, a master of disguise, whose ability to mimic voices and personalities bordered on the supernatural. Tahil Ramani had honed his craft over years, studying Hollywood's movers and shakers with obsessive detail. He could slip into character at a moment's notice, flawlessly mimicking the accents, speech patterns, and personalities of the powerful women he impersonated. His knowledge of the industry was encyclopedic, allowing him to craft believable backstories and scenarios that ensnared his victims with terrifying ease. But even as the net began to close around him, Tahil Ramani continued his charade, doubling down on his scams and luring in more victims. It took a coordinated international effort to bring him to justice, with investigators from the UK, the US, and Indonesia all working together to track down this elusive predator. When Tahil Ramani was finally arrested in 2020, the world was stunned by the audacity and scale of his operation. The Hollywood con queen had preyed on the dreams of hundreds, exploiting their hopes and fears with chilling precision. His arrest marked the end of one of the most bizarre and elaborate scams in modern history, but the scars left behind were deep. The victims, many of whom had lost thousands of dollars, were left to pick up the pieces of their shattered dreams, forever haunted by the memory of the con queen's smooth-talking voice and the empty promises that led them down a path of despair. The story of the Hollywood con queen is a cautionary tale, a reminder of the dangers lurking in the shadows of the dream factory. It's a story of deception and greed, of how the pursuit of fame can be twisted into a weapon of destruction. It's a story that, in its own twisted way, is quintessentially Hollywood, where the line between fantasy and reality is often blurred, and where the pursuit of a dream can sometimes lead to a nightmare. Thank you for listening to AI True Crime. We'll be back next week with our first multi-part series looking at food and crime, starting with the Zanku chicken murders. I'll talk to you then.